Hello everyone and welcome to today's YouTube stream. My name is Women International Master Jessie February, and today we'll be talking about how in the world I won the African Women's Chess Championship. And yes, this year it was held in Accra, Ghana, and I was facing some of Africa's strongest female players. As you all know, there's an open section and a women's section, so I'll be going through my games. Initially, I wanted to divide my games up and tackle them all in separate videos, but I thought, why not just stream it? That way, you get to see my live reaction to certain moments, especially critical ones during the games. No cuts, no fuss, no muss, and all the other words in between. I haven't taken a look at my games since I actually played them. Well, I analyzed them directly after playing them. Since I left Ghana, I haven't seen them. Since I played in the South African Championship directly after, maybe there were some minor mistakes I was fixing, but hadn't actually gone into them, well, gone over them in depth. So that is what we're going to do today. And I'm both nervous and excited to show you those games. Some of them I realized were not recorded properly, and therefore I don't think were either entered into the database at all. So maybe some of them will be a huge surprise to see for the first time. And I'm looking at the game review on chess.com, so this is going to be fantastic. Hello everyone joining us today. Thank you so much for being here in chat. I hope you don't mind. There is going to be very little chat interaction, though I will be reading the chat messages after the stream just so that we can tackle the games as quickly as possible, and that the video afterwards, after the stream, can, if anyone were to watch it, it would be smooth sailing and no pauses to be answering chat messages, though I will be going through the comments afterwards and will definitely be answering if there are any interesting questions there for me. So my first game, I played against one of the youngest participants in the tournament, and her name is either Aina, I'm not too sure how to pronounce her name. Very interesting, very exotic, and from a country none other than Madagascar, neighboring South Africa. Believe it or not, it is one of the neighboring countries I haven't visited, and I am from South Africa, so I know one of the zonal tournaments were held there once upon a time, but wasn't able to actually participate. All right, I was playing with the black pieces in round one, and to be honest, my mentality going into the tournament, I knew that there were 9 games. So yes, every game counts, but a victory, it was a bit strange. On one hand, I wanted to win every single game. On the other, I was also content with results other than a win. And I think that took off a lot of pressure, especially for games I didn't really have either the time or the resources to prepare. At some point during the tournament, there was a huge break or cable break or something like that, which affected the internet quite a lot. It was somewhere underwater and affected a lot of the coastal countries of Africa. So it was a very big deal. But those of us who were using online resources to prepare were obviously in huge trouble. Luckily, I was housing alongside some other players who had a database for me to use where I needed it. But unfortunately, I couldn't find a lot of games on this opponent and went in thinking, oh well, I guess I will just have to play chess. And so the first move she played was e4. And something I had to think about over the board was whether I was going to go with my regular French. Those of you who know me quite well know that I play the French defense quite religiously, and then of course I've been dabbling in openings such as the Sicilian. I think once or twice I've played the Scandinavian. So yeah, other openings I would like to take a look at, especially now that I've seen a chessable course being released by Jovi Huska. I would love to see that on the Caro-Kann. Learn the Caro-Kann, everything you need to know about the Caro-Kann. And yes, I know my camel wife, aka Rebecca Selkirk, would be very happy to hear that I am leaning in that direction, though I don't think I will ever be able to convince her to play the French. All right, so drum roll, I decided in this game to play c5. And on one hand, I was comfortable playing c5 because if she had done any preparation, a lot of the games I had played prior to this, I hadn't played a lot of Sicilian. Maybe in the All-African games, you can have spotted 1 or 2 games where I played the Sicilian, though probably quite badly. Out of the opening, I was okay, but I knew in classical chess I had more than enough time to sort out any problems I've had over the board. So, knight c6, d4, and so she's playing the open Sicilian, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and here I decided to play e5. Now, as much as I'm not very familiar with the line knight b5, g6, and then future a6 and so on, there's a lot of theory that goes into that opening. I know that after knight b5 here, you're supposed to play d6, which is the main line, though here I play something on the side, like a sneaky attack here, a6. Something I'd prepared as well, and after knight to d6, check, you give up your bishop for the knight, and it looks very bad because now white's queen is in black's territory. There's no way for this bishop to come out, but there is a small resource that black has, and it is offering a trade of queens. So after queen to e7, there are a couple options that white has. White can either capture the queen, go back to d3, or go back to d1. Although I don't know about queen d2, I'm not as familiar with this move. And I realized that in a lot of blitz games, white would capture and after knight takes something like knight c3, d5. And looks like black is losing a pawn, but after pawn takes, you can play knight to b4. And now you are aiming towards this pawn. And, oh, let me turn off that evaluation. I want to keep the evaluation bar. Let's turn off feedback. Lines? Yes, that works. Okay, so knight b4 is the main move against e takes d5, and after bishop to d3, black can simply take the bishop here. So knight takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, and even though it looks like black is a pawn down and white has a strong center, one of these pawns are going to fall. After bishop to f5, white would have to make a move, something like castles or something along those lines maybe, and although maybe not this move. I'm trying to figure out a way to protect the pawn. Okay, let's say king e2 and long castle. Getting the king, well, I suppose not entirely safe, connecting the rooks, and now putting pressure on the d file, so hoping to pick up one or both pawns. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of theory. I find it quite exciting, despite the queens not being on the board anymore. I used to consider myself a tactical player, but after seeing my level of chess over the past month, I would say that every chance I've had to attack, I've often opted for positional directions rather than tactical ones. So it's confused me quite a bit. And perhaps I have to review my repertoire and come up with a solution to that. But then again, they say that really strong players are neither tactical nor positional. They are rather universal, knowing both how to play tactical when necessary and positional when necessary. So I'm hoping to be leaning in that direction, though I'm not too proud of how I've been playing my openings, especially in the South African Championship, which we will be creating a later video on. And yeah, my defense is maybe a little bit better. On guard. All right, so queen to d1 is what my opponent played instead, wanting to keep the queens on the board. This game was increasingly difficult, especially in the middle game. I had to come up with some crazy ideas, though. yeah, very, very strong player from Madagascar, definitely showing her worth. I think she was the under 12 champion of her country, if I'm not mistaken. I may be mistaken, though that I think is what I heard. And h6, as you can see, it got quite the annotation here of question mark, exclamation mark, which I believe means inaccuracy, and I'll show you why. The reason why I played h6 as opposed to regular d6 is because I didn't want bishop to g5, bishop to e6, and this is the normal line, knight to d5, you're meant to capture, and after pawn captures, you go knight b8. Now this is still theory, though I wanted to avoid altogether bishop to g5 because it can become quite annoying. So I should have perhaps gone bishop e6, or rather d6 instead. I decided against it and played something out of theory, hoping that, you know, when you're playing against someone lower rated than you are, try to take them out of preparation and perhaps out of their comfort zone. Because at the end of the day, you are the more experienced player and will probably come out on top. So let's see what I did play instead. Here I played bishop, no, I played h6 here. I didn't play d6, I played h6. And after bishop to e3, d6, which is a mistake. And this is where the surprise, all the surprise is coming from, because I don't recall seeing d6 as a mistake when I was analyzing my game, though I would love to know why it is a mistake. So I'm going to turn on the engine to understand, because I don't think there are any tactics for white in this position, because it didn't give white an immediate winning advantage, perhaps slightly better position. And it's suggesting here that white goes queen to d2, bishop to e6, and long castle. Okay, so that is why it has given white quite a bit of an advantage here, with black having to play rook d8, bishop to b6, chasing the rook, rook d7, and I can imagine why it is uncomfortable for black to play in a position like this. All right, so instead of d6, which is what I did play, let's just go back to the position. So instead of d6, what should I have played? I should have played here castles, perhaps. So it says here castles or b5 is okay. Castles or b5. All right, or rook b8. I don't like rook b8 too much. So let's go castle, queen d2 with the same idea. And b5, long castle, and the pawn is still on d7. So it allows us to play bishop to d7. Okay, so to preserve the pawn, at least keep the protection of the pawn by the knight, you are not going to push the pawn. And then there's no need to if you're going to put the bishop on b7 anyway. Because the whole point is that black eventually wants to play d5, though in a position like this it becomes nearly impossible. All right, so f3 and then rook ac8, and you're maybe just going to pile up on the king a little bit and king b1 eventually. Okay, so going back to the game, I keep going back very far. Okay, d6, h3, trying to prevent, I'm just guessing here, bishop to g4, though my plan is to play bishop to e6. And also prophylaxis in future, if the king does castle, it will not be back rank checkmate, since the king has an escape square. And here I played bishop to e6, just trying to develop my pieces, bishop to e2 and castles. All right, regular position, I guess, and my plan is still relatively straightforward, though I know in my mind I'm supposed to control d5. It's just very, very difficult because the knight at any point can jump to d5. So I started on the queen side. I played b5, a3, and knight to a5. So now my plan is to provoke a move like b3, knowing that c4 usually in the Sicilian is a square that the knight can jump to, or black can try to control to try and trade the light squared bishop, or perhaps just gain space on the queen side, because that is where black is supposed to play, though I am speaking as a very inexperienced Sicilian player and hope to learn more about the Sicilian sometime soon. And I succeeded at provoking it, though I would probably have to bring my knight back at this stage. Probably knight to c6 is better, but I wanted to utilize the pieces that were not yet moved, and that is the rook here on a8, moved it to c8. One of the best moves suggested in this position. It actually does suggest rook a to c8, but also knight to b7 or knight to c6. Yes. I am reading chat for the first time this stream, just to brush over if I'd forgotten anything, hoping that I'm audible and the rest, but it seems good. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. All right, so here I just played rook a to c8, and as much as they're giving me a question mark, an exclamation mark, I don't think it is a terrible move. I think it is a I think it looks pretty normal, don't you? All right, so queen to d2 and queen to c7. Now my plan is quite obvious. I just want to attack the knight and also the pawn on c2. Okay, a knight to d5, it was given an exclamation mark. And usually in a position like this, it is always recommended that you give the bishop away for this knight, just because the center is quite static. Pawns are not going to be moving forward anytime soon, and so I don't mind giving the bishop in this position just because it is quite a closed center. And knight to b7, trying to bring the knight back and also back to the center into the game. c4. All right, here I had a couple things in my mind. The first thing I thought about is white is playing on the side of the board where I thought I was stronger. He's playing on the side of the board where I think I should be playing, and if anything, that white should go for moves like f4 instead. So let's see what is suggested. Okay, c4 is one of the main moves that the engine suggests you're using. Stockfish 16 light, and rook f to c1. Okay, so perhaps I've misjudged the position quite a lot, but and it's given knight b7, it's given it an x, meaning a mistake. I don't understand why. Maybe I had a slight advantage, but okay, I didn't. After c4, knight to e4, trying to attack the queen, but also gain a tempo here, trying to push f5 and maybe bring the knight back if necessary. And after queen to c2, f5, bishop to d3, gives me an opportunity to capture finally on c4. And after pawn takes, knight b to c4, a c5. And it looks like a little puzzle piece, right? You're just lodging a little puzzle piece into the square. It's a nice blockade of the pawn. It's protecting the knight. It's attacking the bishop. I just felt like one of those moves where you're like, yeah, that's where it belongs. All right, and after bishop takes, queen takes. Of course, I cannot take with the knight here just because bishop takes f5 and I lose a pawn, and the bishop is attacking the rook. Though I'm sure it is possible to still take it and not be completely lost. I took with the queen, and the plan is if bishop takes, pawn takes, and queen takes, I can just pick up the pawn on c4 when I want to, or I can play rook c4 and take with this rook, and then d5 is in trouble. Rook f to e1 and rook f6. Now that the rook is no longer defending the f1 pawn, I saw an opportunity to attack it. And by doing so, I'm also utilizing my rooks, can bring my rook to g6 at any point to try and attack the king. And I love kingside attacks. That's why maybe the Sicilian would be great for me if I actually had more prospects against the white king. And otherwise, it's nice to catch my opponents out in the opening when playing the French and they have no idea what they're doing. All right. So after bishop takes e4, pawn takes e4, rook takes e4, and I finally was able to double up my rooks on the f-file and rook to e2. But now that the rook is no longer on the 4th rank, it gave me a chance to play rook to f4, attacking the pawn, and after rook c1, now it looks like I can take a3 because it's a free pawn, but not necessarily. I feel like it's also a bit of a waste of time here. If I ended up taking, it might actually be really bad. Oh, the engine likes it. Well, the engine doesn't mind it. With c5 being the next move, I wanted to keep things, you know, a little bit don't be suspicious, only nutritious. I wanted to keep it spicy. I wanted to say to my opponent, you know what, I'm attacking you. The threat is stronger than the execution here. At any point, I can capture the pawn, but right now, I'm not going to. I'm a pawn down, but I still feel like I have pressure. And in actual fact, it looks a little bit like Zugzwang. Like whatever heavy piece my opponent decides to move, it will be bad for them. Because if the rook leaves the second rank, f2 is hanging. If the queen leaves the c file, then c4 is hanging. So it's very difficult. And if the queen leaves the second rank, it's also f2. So f2, a3, and c4 are the pressure points. So I do have compensation for the pawn. All right, so here I decided to play rook f to f6 just to start putting my pieces, or at least attempt to put my pieces on better squares. It also may look like a move that says, you have no idea what you're doing, and you might be absolutely right. Though, in my defense, it is also a waiting move. I want to see what my opponent is capable of doing in this position. And she came up with a4, trying to defend the pawn by moving it away from the attack of my queen. I played a5 saying, stop right there, can I see some ID please? And then g3. So I can lodge my rook into f3, king to g2, and now a move that looks bad, but has a lot of science behind it. It's like believing in the Big Bang Theory, but not having any solid proof. My Big Bang Theory right now is queen to a3. With the threat, I know it gives white a massive advantage, but it's also very difficult to decipher. The correct move is c5. Looks normal, which he played. D takes, and get ready for this, rook to d2 to back up this pawn, because it's a pass pawn. Not so easy. You play c5, d takes c5, queen takes c5 comes to mind, and if you don't see this tactic, it's very difficult to come back from that, because now my threat is rook takes g3, looks like I'm giving up a rook, and if the pawn takes, I got queen to f3. But remember, I have to wait for the queen to stop defending the rook so that this can actually be effective. Otherwise, it's not. So I was sort of saying to my opponent, try me. Try and play c5. Let's see what happens. I wanted her to play c5. I hadn't seen this idea entirely over the board. Of course, I had to see it through the eyes of an engine. Rook d2 being the best move. Rook d1 is also possible. And queen c4, where you're still protecting the rook. Instead, my opponent took the c5 pawn, giving the advantage to me. After rook takes g3, I still don't know how this position is completely equal. It gave me a brilliancy in the first round. Honestly, I thought there was only place to go up. Now I can only go sideways. All right, so my opponent did not capture just because I think it took her by surprise that I was playing this move, and instead decided to play king to f1. And now the position is completely winning for me after queen f3, king to e1, and there's a nice combination, rook to g1, king, rook takes, queen has to take, because if the king takes, I gain the rook, and there aren't any perpetual checks. Queen takes, and takes, check, king e1 is forced, well not forced, because if the king goes to the c file, I can just go rook c6 and pick up the queen. Queen to h1, king to d2, and forcing the king to the c file now. King c2, rook c6, taking the queen, rook takes e5, and after this, there was a resignation. So it wasn't a completely convincing victory, though we take those. And in all honesty, a lot of it is playing moves where you're like, is this a bluff? Is this going to work? I know it's called hope chess, but at times, these are the things we have to do in order to ensure our games are insightful. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking nonsense so that we can dive directly into the next game. All right, so the first game took us 24 minutes, and I was hoping that the stream would only last an hour. And I played 9 of these games, so I'll make sure to go a little bit faster for the future games. All right, my next game was against a lovely lady named Maud Benson. And I think we stayed pretty much in the same apartment block, or not apartment block, but space. So I saw her quite a lot, and she's very friendly and very approachable. All right, so I played with the white pieces here, and in this game, I'm trying to remember. Yes, I was able to find some games when I prepared against her, and though it wasn't a lot to go on, I was anticipating quite an interesting game because her first move, I believe, is d6, which leads to the perk, or however you pronounce it, it's PIRC. I've heard different pronunciations before. Okay, e4, d6, d4, knight f6, bishop d3, protecting the pawn on e4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, and bishop to g5. All right, knight b to d7. And my plan is quite clear here. Okay, it's showing us the feedback again. So I'm going to turn that off. It'll still show us the little evaluation or the punctuation next to the moves if it's bad or good. So get ready to see a lot of punctuation, and not the good kind. Okay, so knight b to d2. My plan is simple. I want to play c3, queen c2, and long castle. That way it'll give me an opportunity to attack on the king side, starting with h4, and g6 is a nice hook, though it looks quite safe with the bishop being on g7, the fianchetto, and the knight on f6. It's still possible to launch an attack and be successful with it. So here we go. After castles by black, I played c3, e5, and just continued with queen c2. And queen c2 is frowned upon here for no reason other than chess.com being dramatic. h3 is one of the moves, but I really want to play h4. So, okay, I continued queen to c2, c6, and h4. And I really like h4. Okay, queen c7 is the main move here, and I'm fine with h4. Listen, if you want to be aggressive, but the engine says no, just switch off the engine. What is it gonna do? Is it gonna come after you when you're sleeping? No. All right, so I long castled and d5. I think I spent quite a bit of time here. I thought I saved the timestamps of the games, but it doesn't seem like I did. I think that the other games in the folder might have timestamps, but we'll have to see later on. So there are a few options for me over here. I could take the pawn on d5, but I didn't see a need because if there was a threat of taking my pawn on e4, I could just simply capture back and my bishop will have an open diagonal for when I do eventually push h5. I could also take on e5, and I was just looking for ways to gain a tempo meaning time or, space and development and that sort of thing. So taking the pawn, knight takes, queen takes, and then I thought about f4. And that way I was thinking about ways of also removing the defenders around the king. I want to bring in my rook, and it will come in the next 2 moves. So 1 move, and black will have to react, and I can take the pawn and have an open file. Then I'll have 1, 2, 3 pieces in the attack, maybe 4, but if I trade, okay, let's remove the arrows and the colors here. If I trade the knight for the bishop, then black will have 1 piece if I had to cut the board in half, and a rook. So a bishop and a rook versus my bishop, queen, and rook. I thought that was pretty good chances, maybe even a knight on my side. All right, so that's what I decided to do. I took the pawn, knight takes, queen takes, and f4. After the queen retreats to c7, now I went ahead and I took. So bishop takes f6, bishop takes and e5. Now that the bishop, okay, I thought, it's normal to retreat in this position and then I can play h5. Taking, of course, is a huge blunder, and you can't push the pawn because I have a pawn on f6, on f4, and queen b6. It depends now what will black do. Black can play bishop to g4, but then I think I was actually prepared to give up the exchange. I wanted to take the pawn, and after pawn takes, maybe then move my rook. Or maybe I can move my rook first. There's really no rush. And it's impossible for black to capture because I think I can just take. And bishop takes h7, king h8, rook h1. And this is winning. So there was a lot to do. But instead, my opponent decided to take the pawn for no reason. Although it looks scary. In all honesty, my bishop's on the light squares, my knight's about to jump in. It does look scary. So after bishop takes, pawn takes, I think it's pretty straightforward. h5, rook e8 takes, and I can actually sacrifice here because the rook is hanging. If I go bishop takes, oh, another brilliancy. Pawn takes, and queen g7, then the rook's hanging. So the king will have to move. My rooks are coming in, and it's just going to be over very soon. So king f8, rook f1, bishop f5, and the game is over. And there was resignation. That one went a little bit quicker than the last, at least. Just looking at chat once more. Alrighty, moving on to round number 3. I was thrown directly into the deep end. No mercy whatsoever. My third round opponent was Shayenda. Okay. So my third round opponent was Shayenda, and she was the tournament top seed. Also, someone I've been playing against since 2013. So 11 years of playing against each other, all the way from African youth to African. I don't know about African juniors. I don't think I've participated in an African junior event. And then, of course, African championship. And Shahenda has won quite a number of times. I think she won in 2017 and then again in 2022. And then Lena won last year in Egypt. But yes, so we have played a number of times. I've had some good results, some draw. Okay, I think I had one draw, a couple losses. I won against her once before this, which was in 2021 in Lilongwe, Malawi. That is also where I won my first African championship. And so perhaps this is a trend. When I can beat a strong player like this, usually means good results for the tournament. But okay, I played with the black pieces, as I do most of the time when I play against her, unfortunately. And I had the worst pairings as well. In the third round, I played against top seed with black. In the fourth round, I played against the second seed with black. So double black. So it wasn't, the odds were against me. But we channeled our frustrations and we, succeeded. All right, but let's take a look at the game. All right, so e4, and I decided e6. Since it is my main weapon, it isn't something that I want to sway away from. I thought, why not just play the French? What's wrong with the French? Nothing. Chessable course coming soon. Not really. Okay, so d4, d5, knight to c3, and d takes e4. So there are a number of things I could have played here, along with knight f6, and she has played this line against, I'm not sure against me before, but on many occasions it goes like this, and it's not pleasant. You don't want to play c5 immediately because of knight b5, and it's just very, what's the word? I don't want to say monotonous, because in some ways it's just very repetitive. It's still theory, And there's a lot. There's just so much. F5, G6, long castle, C5. It's like we've gone down this road so many times. Why not just open the position from the get-go? You know what I mean? Okay, I took the pawn. Sue me. After knight takes, knight to f6, knight captures. I expected bishop to g5, which would have looked like the line that we went over. But that would have meant more exchanges and maybe not something she wanted to go into. I know for a fact that she expected a really good result from this game, and that was not something. I mean, like I said, a lot of the time I had to fight with myself in my head, saying, you know, I have to be content with all three results at any point in time. I should be content winning. That's obviously the best result possible. A draw, even if you're in a really good position. A draw is not a loss. And of course, a loss where you can't help it. Losses happen. And we have to deal with it. And as soon as I made peace with all three results, it became easier for me to focus on playing my best chess. Because then it didn't matter. I could be fearless. I could play a move that was not as safe as I would usually play. And I wouldn't be running away at any point. I wouldn't just be playing defensive mode and be like, I'm not ready for this kind of position or structure or anything like that. You just play. Because you're playing because it's fun. You're playing because you love the game. Don't play because you're worried about the result. That's like the worst way to play. Okay, we continue. Knight f3, h6. So h6 is to avoid bishop to g5, and the queen could get trapped at some point. All right, so bishop to d3, bishop d7. And I think this is where the theory sort of ends. Bishop d6 is the main move. My plan with bishop d7 is to try and put the bishop on c6. It's usually strongest on this diagonal. And then play something like knight d7 and try to get e5 later on. And after bishop to d7, castles. And now I was afraid to play bishop c6. But not because I was afraid. I mean, bishop c6 I don't think is a move here. Right? It'll show a mistake because c4. c4 or knight e5. Yeah, I was afraid of knight e5. And I just spoke about being fearless, though I think in this position it was mainly because of White's good ideas that I avoided playing that, and I played knight c6 instead. Let me turn off the feedback. Once again, we don't like the approval or disapproval of our ideas. All right, so after c4, I was happy to see it. I know that d5 is coming and it's going to sort of open up the king, but it allowed me this opportunity to play bishop to d6. I wanted to long castle in this position. I think it's possible to long castle. Oh, yes, I remember this. I remember this position because I should have taken. But I overestimated her idea here. I thought after taking, and then something like rook e1 maybe? Or rook b1. Because the plan is to basically just develop and gain time by pushing my queen around. And even though I'm a pawn up, I am still behind in development. So I believed too much in her plan and decided against it by playing bishop to d6. And after d5, now I can just play knight to e5. I don't have to capture the pawn, mainly because rook e1 is a huge threat and I don't want to have to retreat my bishop to protect my king or move my king around and not castle. So after knight takes, bishop takes, and queen to e2. Now I can just long castle. I think my position is quite safe. There aren't any knights on the board. The pawns, even though they look quite scary in the center and on c4, they're not going to cause too much harm to my king. I'm going to play king b8 at some stage. And if bishop e3, it just allows me king b8 to protect the a7 pawn. And bishop to e3, king b8. It says king b8 here is an inaccuracy because it's suggesting, oh, the best move is king b8. Why? I think the engine doesn't like us today, but it's okay. So it suggests maybe even taking the pawn, but I like king b8. Rook f to e1, and I'm okay trading here. This is the I'm content with a draw trade idea. And after queen to f3, bishop to g5 once again, offering a trade of bishops, offering a trade of queens, and it looks like Shahanda here was probably content as well with the trade of queens, though after the trade wants to end up with a better position for her pieces. Being here, if I take queen takes queen, bishop takes, and the bishops are quite good. I took anyway and played bishop to f6 to put pressure on b2, again overestimating the power of my bishop attacking b2, because I think at some stage it was possible for me to capture b2, but I didn't. I was afraid of my king being unsafe, or tactics. All right, so bishop to f4, rook h to e8. I think maybe even here, no, it wasn't possible yet. And d6. And this is where I went into the think tank. Those of you who play a lot of classical chess know all too well what a think tank is. You go into this mode and you start analyzing and evaluating. And those are usually the critical positions. And this is one of them. Do you take the pawn? Do you move the pawn? Do you move the pawn again? What do you do? And I was solidly leaning towards c6, mainly because I wanted to narrow down my forces against d6. I also thought about c5, but then I thought this pawn is already protected by the bishop. If I move my own bishop, it even becomes possible for this pawn to move forward. My king's in danger. So perhaps I should take it and move my king. But then I thought, where do I move my king? If I move it to a8, it no longer has squares. If I move it to c8, c8 was the plan. So that's what I did. I took the pawn, and after bishop takes, king c8. And it looks kind of scary that the king is on a semi-open file, but the plan is to play bishop c6, trade a bishop, take control of the b file, and also put pressure on this bishop. c5, solidifying the bishop, but no need to worry. I will also want to trade this bishop with bishop e7. So bishop c6 takes, and rook d1. Now it's easy. Bishop e7, rook e3, and still looks scary. It looks like the rook wants to come to a3 or take control of the b file and give my king a hard time. But I think I'm just in time as well. Here I can take, pawn takes. If rook takes, it's the same. Let me just turn off the lines. Okay, rook takes, and king d7. And if rook a3, wait, is this correct? I'm trying to think. I don't know if I should take here. We'll go here. Maybe this is better. Because if you take, I'm threatening this, and I have a pass pawn. So the king is I think that the fact that there was back rank checkmate threats, it was really in my favor. So after the pawn took, king d7, and now my plan is to swing my rooks across and protect the pawn as well as control the b file. Rook to g3 first. I said no thank you. I genuinely did not want to move my pawns just because I know that every pawn pushes a weakness, but not only that, but there was really no need for me to start rolling my pawns at all. And I thought, okay, g6, h5 is not bad. But here, rook g8, it does the same thing. And now the back rank is completely unprotected, so I go rook b8. And after rook to a3, threatening the pawn with check and f7, I go rook b7, trying to double up my rooks. And now another think tank moment. Though, if I play rook to a8, there is a very sneaky move. Oh wait, not rook a8, sorry, rook g to b8. The sneaky move is rook takes a7, because if I take the rook, my rook on b8 is hanging. And it just looks like a cute tactic that gives white an advantage, though I didn't think it was brilliant for white because yes, I'm losing a pawn, but I'm also gaining the d pawn. And at the end of that variation, I'm capturing b2, threatening checkmate, threatening the a pawn. There's a lot that can happen. So eventually, instead of capturing the rook, which would have led to... I wonder if taking is possible. No, not really, because rook takes, and even though this looks nice, it's not enough. I don't think. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the same. Okay. Anyway, I doubled up the rooks, even though I saw this tactic, and decided to go into it anyway, because rook takes b8 does not check, and it gives me this chance to play rook takes a2. And after rook b7, I captured the pawn on d6, not wasting any time, and king f1, preventing rook check. I honestly expected something like g4 or f4, trying to get the king an escape square that way, but king f1 instead. And then I played f5, just because if I were to lose some pawns on this side, I would rather just lose the one pawn, capture on b2, and make him work, or make her rather, work for the other pawns. And that way, while you're wasting time playing rook h7 or rook g6 to capture h6, I can run. I can start running. And you know what they say, past pawns run incredibly fast. All right, rook takes g7 and rook h7. And now I can push the pawn. And guess what? I can push it again. And now the rook is going to try and rush to be behind the pawn. On one hand, I wanted to play rook to b7 to play rook c7, or rook b6 to play rook c6. I definitely know that my rook endgames need more work, and this is not something I'm very familiar with, so I was bagging on the fact that I had a decent amount of time left on my clock, but unfortunately I was burning through it so fast, and I knew I needed to keep the king at bay as well, because the moment the king goes to e1 and then to d1, maybe we can get a mating net set up, or we can start nomming on the other pawns. This is the only passed pawn that white has, but it's still sitting on h2. All right, so king d5, rook to c8, king d4, and h4. And I looked, and I thought, but I'm faster. So I played king here, threatening checkmate, by the way, and king check, rook check, sorry, king c2, and rook to d6. c3. So this is probably the plan, right? So you want to take, you want to go check again, but maybe it's too slow. My plan is to go king b1, maybe king a2, depending on where the rook's going to end up. So king b1, check, here. Now I want to play, because at no point do I want to give my pawn up for this rook. I wasn't sure, it probably does. My rook can catch up to the pawns, and thank goodness for this, otherwise my rook is against 3 pawns. But I have maybe c2 and maybe rook b1 first, take and queen. So that's why I played king to a2 here. And after rook to e8, trying to be behind the pawn, I played c2 and then king to b1 back. The reason why I didn't want to play rook to b1 check and queen is because the king would have had access to the second rank once again. At least this way, if I were to go king b1, king e2, and queen, there's check. So it was impossible there. And after g3, it's over. And now it's completely better for me. I will at least pick up 1 pawn, and then there was resignation. So it was a really, really lucky endgame. Things were completely equal until they weren't. And I can definitely thank the fact that we were in time trouble at some point and there were some inaccuracies. But all in all, it reminded me that I have a lot of work to do on my endgames. Yes. All right, moving on to round number 4, where I was paired against Lina Nasser from Algeria, who is the former African women's champion who won in Gaza, Egypt. Was Gaza? Yes, it was. Egypt last year. And she had quite a convincing performance as well. I lost my game against her last year. But this time it was a chance for redemption, you know? With the black pieces, I sat there and I kept thinking, why are the odds against me? Why do the heavens hate me? But here we are. Another moment where I had to be content with any result possible. I was very, very much happy if the result was a draw. And I played solidly until it was necessary for me to take action because she was pushing. I had a lot of pressure points in the position and I wasn't sure how to react. And so I did what I could. All right, so let's continue. Let's take a look at the game. I turned off, turning off feedback as well. Alrighty, c4. And I looked at c4. I thought she may be playing c4 because last year at the African Championship, okay, I played white. There was a tournament where I played against Lena and she played c4 against me and I lost. So we revisit this opening, one of the banes of my existence. And I do not like the English. I played it once as a surprise weapon, but turned it into the Botvinnik system. So one thing I can say is, how the heck do you play against the English? And my second point is, I needed to do something about this. So I wanted to play as crazily as possible. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this. Or don't. I can't tell you what to do. Okay, so e5. And on one hand, I wanted to play the reverse Sicilian, which is knight f6, d5, where you're just playing, you know, open position, knight b6, knight c6, bishop e7, f6 or f5, depending, castle. But then I was like, nah, that's boring. We want to have some fun. I played knight f6, and here I played d6. I wanted to defend the pawn, but I also didn't want to commit to something like knight c6. I thought there are chances where maybe we can play a sort of Botvinnik setup, maybe c5. You know, we're really keeping our options open here. The one thing I was sure of is by committing to a pawn move this early or second pawn move this early, I'm shutting down the bishop. I can't put the bishop on c5 anymore, so there's no chance in going into that variation. I could play bishop e7 and go into like an old Indian kind of setup, but not really. Or I could play g6 and then put the bishop here. But then it looks kind of odd, don't you think? With knight d7, castles, but then it's like a King's Indian defense with e5 early. So I wasn't sure, because I have never studied the King's Indian defense before. So here we are. I thought, move order's muddled. Hopefully our minds are muddled too, but that only means one thing, that we have to play chess. So d4 was played, and I expected it as well. And I wanted to capture, but decided to play knight b to d7 instead, because now if white decides to take on e5, I can take with the pawn, and after e4, I don't mind. I can play bishop e7, castle, and knight b6. Put pressure on c4, or just reposition my knight to a square. That would be much better. Maybe even knight c5, put pressure on the e4 pawn. Okay, so e3 was played, which I was surprised by. I honestly expected something like bishop g5 at some point, just to take advantage of the fact that my piece placement is kind of strange. Anyway, I went for g6. Now that the bishop was stuck on c1, bishop e2, bishop g7. Maybe she had too much faith in my structure too. Or rather, my choice in opening. Castles, and we have a King's Indian defense. Do I know the ideas? No. Am I going to try and pretend to know the ideas? Of course I am. Okay, so a5, which was probably the wrong idea. What I need to go for is something like rook e8 maybe, try to push the pawn. You know, the usual King's Indian defense ideas, maybe even f5 at some stage. Not me pretending to know what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm supposed to play h5 and go knight h7 and then move the knight around that way, and then play something like rook e8, knight f8, eventually g5, knight g6, something like that. I need to learn. I definitely need to learn. But a5, because I thought white wants to play b4. How do we stop b4? Seems prophylactic. Takes some space on the queen side, but really it's the wrong side of the board I'm playing on. Okay, so rook to d1, rook to e8, and every single move deserves this odd punctuation because we clearly know what we're doing. All right, pawn takes. Maybe it was better to take with the knight, but... And do you know why? Because this knight can't move. And you know what? After knight b5, I can't push c6. I can't play queen e7 because the pawn on c7 is hanging. It is shambles. So that is why I should have taken with the knight. However, after knight to b5, it looks completely horrible for me. I decided to play b6. Being the only way to develop my pieces, bishop to b7 has to come. Thank goodness for the knight being protected. And then maybe rook c8, and then maybe queen e7. Oh, but it's such a long road. You know what they say? All roads lead to checkmate. No? Okay, I made that up on the spot. You probably couldn't tell. I said it with such confidence. Okay, and c5. And I looked at this move. And I wondered, the threat is c6. If I take it, I have double pawns, as well as an isolated pawn on a5. But it gets better. I'm a pawn up. That is the better. That's all I have. And it looks like the only way forward as well, because now if I take the pawn, what does white actually have? You can't take the pawn. You can't, play a3, b4. I have bishop b7 coming. I have the open file for my rook. This is actually not so bad. So perhaps this decision to try and provoke the captures, giving me a worse position, actually gave me some space. And after bishop to c4, putting pressure on the f7 pawn, because now this is quite a threat. I can play rook e7, and there's queen b3, and I can probably just put a stop to this with like a4. E4 I don't like, bishop a6 is nice. Or rook b8. I just decided to go ahead and play rook e7, preemptively. Though it is probably not the best because my pieces aren't working together very well, and I need to focus on developing my pieces. So here rook to e7 first and e4 got an exclam. And I didn't know why, because I was about to put pressure on it with my bishop. But probably to block the bishop and stop me from attacking the f3 knight. So in this position, white decides to play queen b3, not really threatening much because my rook is on e7. And after a4, I took the pawn. Now it may look a little bit funny, but I'm actually 2 pawns up. 2 pawns up. And the point being is that when you are down in material, but your position seems to have some compensation, the problem is, and the struggle is, you have to prove that compensation. If you are unable to do that, you are just material down. And so that is the sort of hypothetical question I had posed to my opponent. Can you prove that your position is worth 2 pawns more? And right now, I don't think. Although I'm probably not at a level where I'm able to evaluate a position that well. Though if I were white, I would not be able to. So let's see if there's some improvements. But knight takes e4 got a big X for some reason. Maybe I'm supposed to take with the bishop instead. Let's see what it says. Bishop takes e4 is better. But it gives it pretty much the same advantage. Okay. Queen to d2. Why queen d2? Queen d2 because I don't know. I don't know why queen d2. Maybe to protect the bishop. To allow this bishop to come out. Okay. So plan is probably to develop the bishop. Not sure where, but to develop the bishop. It's also very tricky for me because my knight is still pinned. This knight is quite strong on b5, putting pressure on c7. My pieces aren't as coordinated as I want. I do want to play something like knight d6, offering a trade, because that way I can capture back with the pawn, but the rook is also there. So that would mean giving up a pawn. And then I would only be a pawn up. And honestly speaking, I don't think it's enough for me. 2 pawns or more. All right, so queen b8 was the move I came up with. And I think this was the exact plan. I want to play knight to d6. Get out of the pin. My knight is now free. I can also play knight f6 if I want to. And my queen is defending this d6 square. So once my pieces, if they were to take, if Lena were to take the knight on d6, attack back with a pawn, and my position and structure, everything is perfect. Everything's fixed. All right, so bishop to g5. I decided to trade the bishop because on one hand, I felt like the dark squared bishop for white could have been quite a menace if I had put a knight there instead, because then I'm just pinning myself again and I'd just gotten out of pin. Why would I want to dive directly into another? And also I can back up my knight on e4 now with the knight on f6. After knight c3, I thought 2 pawns up, got a trade, and queen back to e8. This way, if I want to trade rooks, I can easily play rook d8 next. I'm defending e5, and after rook to b8, bishop c6, and looks kind of strange, but it all really works. The rook cannot enter the position. Bishop b5 just means a good trade for me, and I'm very happy. But now c5 is hanging, and I need to do something about it. And I think we're starting to get into time trouble here after king to g7, knight to h4, and stuff is happening. It feels like, I think my heart was beating out of my chest at this point, just because there was this threat that white has to play knight to f5 check. If I move my knight away, I lose the exchange, and there goes the compensation. Or rather, there proves the compensation for white's 2 pawns down, and also structure is so bad they're bound to win another pawn. If I move my king now, it just looks dumb that I played king g7. And if I allow this to continue any further, there's also queen to g5 and knight f5, and my knight is hanging. There's a lot happening. So, it seems rather simple that all I need to do is play h6. And my troubles, they wither away. Because now knight f5 is not possible. I can take it, there's no queen g5 check. But instead I think, and think, and think, and think, and I can't come up with a solution. And instead, I play knight to e4. Not very good. Because f3, my point with knight e4 is that I wanted to protect the square. But another reason is, if I jump to e4, I get chased away with f3. I can also jump to d6, preventing knight to f5. And my knight is no longer hanging. But then I completely forget that rook takes d6 is also possible. But you know what? I'm down on time. I should take that chance. So I play knight to d6. And after that, she doesn't take. I thought rook takes d6 was just okay here. I think. Because rook takes d6, pawn takes d6, knight f5, and I can't take because there's perpetual check. Maybe I have to play king h8. But then it's just a fair trade. Okay. And it's still better for me. So instead, bishop to d5, I played c4 here, and rook takes d6 is no longer a threat. After takes, and queen g5, my rook's hanging. So I played rook to e6. Now I'm protecting f6, valuable square. And if rook takes, I can simply take with the pawn. There's no harm here. So rook to d2. And we were both low on time at this stage. I think it was right before time control. Oh, we're on move 30. So we still have 10 moves to go. So we're both scrambling to play, trying to play the best moves possible, but it's still difficult. And after f4, I think things became a little bit easier for me. queen b6 check, king g2, and okay, it seems I played engine moves here. Rook c2, queen c6 check, king g1, and we're on move 37. I can't believe I'm playing all the good moves. Okay, and then queen takes f6 is somehow the best move because the advantage is so large for me, and then knight f2. Okay, I didn't play knight f2, I played knight to d2. Just, why did I play this? Okay, probably to check and trade the knight, because when the knight is gone, then the advantage is clear. And I played queen to e4 here on move 40, and now we have time. So I thought about it, and I was like, queen takes a4 is just the move. But then I forgot that I could play rook to a8, and I win the rook on c2. So rook c1 instead, e2, and it's pretty simple from here. Of course, you can't take the pawn because of the queen. And knight check, king h1, take the rook, of course, and h4. And you can't take because pin, queen is under attack, rook here is a threat, and it's completely over, and there was a resignation. So I felt like that was another lucky game for me, and I was very happy to have won that game. It seems you already reached an hour, and I don't want to make it like an incredibly long stream, so I might skip over 1 or 2 games. There were some cool tactics in most of them. I think I will show 1 I won, 1 I lost, and 1 I drew. Okay, that seems fair. All right, so I'll show, so probably the last, it won't be the last 3 games. Okay, this one is nice. This is the one I won. And then I'll show you the game that I lost, unfortunately, and the game that I drew. But okay, I spoke to my opponent after I lost my game, and I said to her, had it been anyone else, I would have been completely upset. But I was friends with her, and I'm friends with her mom as well. And we had a nice conversation afterwards. She's a lovely girl. Her name's Deborah from Nigeria. She's 12. A huge talent. I played her in December in that Botswana Invitational as well. So I really was not upset after the loss, though I should have been. I knew that it was also nearing the end of my win streak. I think I'd put way too much pressure on myself. And it was a heartbreaking game because I felt like there were still chances for me to save a draw or something like that. But I think my mentality was I need to draw this game, and it wasn't one of those situations where I'd made peace with all 3 results. That was something where my mental took over, unfortunately, but she played really well. All right, so this game was against Angolan Ignacio Jr., another friend of mine, and let's take a look. All right, so I played with the white pieces. Ignacio plays the Sicilian, specifically this line with e6, and I decided to go back to a line I played back in 2017, also at the African Championship. I believe I played it against, I'm going to lie to you if I try to guess. It might have been Amina Mezoud or Sabrina Latreche, one of the Algerian players. And it was a line that I had prepared specifically for that game. I didn't know it before, I hadn't played Maroxy before that, but I love the Maroxy bind just because of how solid it is. It's very difficult to find a way forward and make headway in any sort of way. So I just wanted to make sure that any knight maneuvers by black were not going to be successful, and that my pawn on e4 was going to be safe. So castling here is a little bit bad just because I think I saw this at the time, that maybe just advancing here with f5 or going b4 to kick the knight out of the square was better, because pushing the pieces back, it's not a bad idea, but I didn't want to overextend and I just wanted to keep things simple. And this is what we call easy chess. I wanted to play easy chess. Okay, so after castles, bishop to b7, and now after bishop b7, I played bishop d2. Reason for this is because they're best friends, JK. I have a beautiful pair of bishops here. I am protecting the pawn on e4 with the bishop, the knight, and the queen. so it is impossible for black to capture. And my plan is also to try and perhaps chase the knight and this knight. So g4, g5, but also b4 was on the table most of the time. I just didn't want to cause or create too many weaknesses in my own position. So after black decides to castle here, I just wanted to solidify my position by bringing the rook into the center, also preparing some pawn move. I wasn't sure, and still, this is something that I need to really work on, is pawn breaks in the center. Which one's good, what to look for, when is one good and, you know, the other not. I know that looking for squares that you are leaving behind is very important. So if I'm moving the e-pawn, for instance, I'm leaving behind f5 and d5. However, d5 is protected by c4. And if I push the f-pawn, I'm leaving behind this very valuable e5 square, allowing white to play. But I know that if black plays e5, then the square is available for my knight. So it works both ways. But this is one of the things that I think are super valuable to study and to learn, like middle game ideas and that sort of thing. Because openings, I can't say they're easy because there's a lot of theory out there today, but I think it's one of the easier things, because theory you can memorize, ideas are easy to catch on if there's an opening that you really, really enjoy playing. Then it's easy to watch maybe your favorite content creator or YouTuber and try to understand the ideas from their point of view. But I think middle game ideas and concepts are harder to grasp because those are probably the ones you're going to have to get better at in practice by playing. And that is the hard part, playing. And then learning from those mistakes. Endgames, again, you have books like Jesus de la Villa, 100 endgames you must know, or something like that, where you're working through the most common endgames out there. Or if you're really brave, Devorevsky's endgame manual. But chances of getting those endgames, you're not supposed to see it that way, but rather learning from the concepts so that underlying ideas, spotting them in your games, are important to save you valuable time on the clock, but also to help you better understand so you don't have to rack your brain in certain positions. And I think that's why chess study is so important. All right, so rook a to e1 and rook f to d8. So I thought, okay, my attack is on the king side and you're moving away from the king side. Plus, I know the plan for Sicilian is d5. But is that really something you need to focus on right now? I didn't think d5 was all that good at the moment. And I thought that the space I had in the center was enough for me to start extending on the king side, because the person who controls the center controls the game. So I went ahead and I played g4, and after bishop to f8, g5. And of course, the knight cannot go back to d7 just because b4 traps this knight and it doesn't have an escape square. It can't go to a4, b3, d3, that's not a square, e4, e6, and of course the only square it has is d7. So once I push that knight back, which is the plan I had in the beginning, I can play b4 here, though I think it's getting a little bit greedy with space because I really am giving maybe even black a hook or a chance to start attacking on the queen side. So I thought, if anything, I will consolidate my queen side with b3, but not right now. I don't have to defend. So then I played rook f3, which was maybe a little bit overambitious. Maybe even not ambitious enough, because f5 seems to be the suggestion here by the engine. But then e5, and I wasn't sure. Once again, it's one of those, where do you push? When do you push? And when are you ready to push? So f5 just did not feel right. And now I would love to take a look at it. So let's see f5, e5. Because taking is simple, right? Taking, you don't even take back with the pawn. You do take back with the pawn. I thought you took back with the knight. Okay, bishop's on f8, maybe pawn. And then you can play f6. Or g6, another one of those. d5. Bishop f4. Okay, attack the queen, sure. Bishop d6, get that bishop away from the king. I'd be happy to trade this. Okay, knight takes seems to be better, yes. And I want to go ahead here. Okay, g6 seems to be a decent move. It gives a large advantage for moves like knight takes d5, c takes d5, but g6 I like very much. Because remember now, bishop f8 was a very valuable defensive piece for black. And now that that's not there anymore, we can start going ahead with our own attack. Okay, I understand why g6, because you want to keep this open for the bishop. And if you were to play f6, maybe it gives black a chance to play g6, and it's not so easy. So I like g6, very nice. Okay, I didn't do that, I played rook f3. Rook f3, idea is simple, you want a rook lift. You just want to put it on h3 and start focusing on the squares that aren't defended very well. And those squares are being the ones that the king is defending and no other piece. Right now, g7 is quite defended, no reason to attack it. But again, f5 seemed to be the way forward. And after g6, I played rook h3. Also just preparing some sort of attack, because now I know that knight g7 might come, bishop g7, but I always have this. Maybe queen f2 for queen h4. My pawn on e4 is defended enough. I don't know how else to get my other pieces into the attack. So let's see. e5 was the suggestion by the engine, and that's exactly what was played. And I think I half expected this idea as well. Oh, oh, my games. Getting brilliancies feels good, man. Okay, so listen up, chat. All right, so knight f5. And I thought, if my opponent captures, I easily have queen h5 because this is mate. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with checkmate because at any point I can open up this diagonal and my pieces have free range. Also, the knight going back to f3, there's really no use for that. So I thought knight f5. But somehow it gives it an equal position. I just thought, it's so pretty. You gotta play it. And I played it. So knight to e6, not accepting the sacrifice. And I thought, now if you take, maybe I can take back with a pawn. I'm threatening the knight. I can also push to f6 and will definitely be checkmate because there's no way you can push the f pawn to defend it with the queen. There's no way to defend. Okay. So I played the other knight to d5. Now I was getting a little greedy, I think, because if you take, I have to take with this pawn. If I take with the other pawn, my bishop on c2 is hanging. So bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight takes f4. Expected that. Bishop takes, pawn takes. I really just expected check first, and then I can't go bishop e3 because knight takes f4. So I have to move my king. Okay, but she took anyway. And maybe that was incorrect. What else was I thinking here? I didn't want to give up the c4 pawn. I felt like it was a very valuable pawn. Maybe it was also time for me to move my knight away, put it on c6, or just keep it on a square like d4, though it would have gone immediately into a pin after queen c5. So queen e4 is actually the suggestion by the engine. So I don't know why it's giving me a question mark. Rook c8, going after the pawn. Here's my consolidatory move. I don't know why it's being given 2 exclams, but I'll take it. Just because, you know, we had spoken the entire game about playing b4, and I said, no, wait. Let's play easy chess. b3, and after f6, leaving some squares behind. e6 being a very valuable square. Taking queen to e6. I think we were both in time trouble at this stage, so it wasn't so easy to figure everything out, but this was a very nice tactic. I was happy to find it because now I can take 2 pawns, and the queen is still hanging. But okay, this was also a very critical moment. I didn't have a lot of time to figure it out. I think I had only 2 minutes on the clock to figure it out. Yes, we have 30-second increment, but 30 seconds goes so fast. Okay, so e7, I think, yeah, there's a lot going on here. I can't remember precisely what it is that I should have done. Maybe push. Yeah, I think push takes rook check, king g7, something like knight f5. I'm not looking at the engine right now. Trying to figure it out myself. And then maiden 1, maiden 8. Okay, then take. Maybe that's not the right move. What's the right move? Rook g6. Go for this. That doesn't seem normal. Okay, maybe the plan is rook g6 for check, but also you want to get the bishop. I would have taken the bishop immediately, to be honest with you. But okay, that's not what happened. I played knight f5, rook c7, e7 with the same idea, check, king f7, and now I should get some material, I think. Wow, they're just dishing out brilliancies like it's no man's business. But yeah, I was able to at least gain a piece at the end there. And then converted. I mean, the 2 pawns are very scary, but we had reached time control and it didn't really matter. At least in this position, it was easier to convert. Because I had 2 pawns, but it wasn't too much of an issue. And then there was resignation because I was about to pick up this pawn and this one was too weak to save. So it was nice. But there comes an end to the winning streak, or at least the games we were reviewing where I won. It is now time to take a look at a game that I had lost. So I played with the black pieces. At this stage, I was already on 6 out of 6. And it was also nearing a point where I could start securing my spot as first or second. Because there were 2 spots, or rather there are 2 spots open for the World Cup, and I definitely wanted one of them. I'd gone before, and I didn't think I had a terrible result because I know in the first round, a low-rated player like me is bound to get paired against someone much stronger. But if I put enough effort and energy and work into my chess, maybe I can do some damage at that level. And maybe even I will have a higher rating, because the higher my rating, the lower rated my opponent will be, which sounds weird, but it works out because the pairings are just a little wiggly and strange. So enough of that. I started putting too much pressure on myself. I thought, okay, 6 out of 6. And everyone's like, yeah, winning streak. When is it going to come to an end? People were posting about it on Facebook. Why am I reading social media during an event? I have no cooking clue. Anyway, so I was talking about, the social media posts rather. They were talking about how will Deborah, put an end to this winning streak, and will she submerge victorious, or some weird stuff. But it's hard to look at that and not be affected by it. And so this is something I'm going to start doing as well. Just stop reading social media posts and start muting channels and stop, these things that affect your mental. Because when competing, your mental is one of the most important things to take into account. So yeah, I realized no matter how well prepared I am, and I think this applies to most people, no matter how well prepared you are, you have to be in the correct mental space to compete. Otherwise, it's probably not going to go in your favor. However, I try to put it all behind me, put it at the back of my head, and because of my very bad memory, it was very easy for me to do. Though, still felt under pressure, and we have another c4, and I was shocked. I didn't expect c4, yet I think she knew that this was my kryptonite. And I played e5 and decided to go for the open Sicilian here, which is the normal line that I usually play. I wasn't about to play the same nonsense I played against Lena. There was a 100% chance she had prepared against that and knew exactly what to do. And I did not. So, decided to play normal chess, easy chess, as we call it, f6, rook c1, castle, and we get to this position over here. All right, so I think the ideas are quite normal. I'm just going to switch on the engine to try and figure it out a little bit, because I think a3 is one of the normal moves to play instead of queen c2. I know knight b4 can be played here just to annoy the queen or push it off the c2 square. I think I can play a6 or a5, I'm not too sure. Knight b4, queen d7, f5, all of these moves are normal. f5 even, I can play queen d7. I think I just wanted to avoid stuff like knight to e4 and knight to c5, and I opted for this move. Knight to d4, which was probably not the best, though it's also not the worst. The position is still equal. And after bishop takes, pawn takes, knight to e4, I thought was quite a good move. I don't know why it's giving it a question mark and exclam. I played c6 to defend the pawn and knight to c5, and I can just capture. And it looks like I'm losing a pawn, but a2 is also hanging, so I can just grab on a2. I do give up my central pawn, but the material is equal, and I'm not completely upset by this position. It looks like white has a lot of space. I still felt quite comfortable. All I need to do is connect my rooks, and that's what I did after queen b6. I'm putting pressure on b2, allowing my rooks the freedom to meet in the center somewhere, one of these 3 squares. And after knight f5, I could just play rook d8. And if the knight were to go to d6, I could just... I think I would have left it, actually. Or maybe... interesting. Okay, anyway. So I played queen to b3, trying to trade queens, because when your position is under pressure or you lack space, you want to trade pieces. Knight d6, I probably should have exchanged queens here, maybe. But I thought after exchanging, the pawn might take, and b7 might actually be in trouble. So I decided to play rook b8. And after f4, another opportunity to take the queen, and I did not. And now it's bishop versus knight. With my position being not very comfortable, but I still felt like it was playable because I have pawns on f6 and c6. And she has to babysit these 2 pawns, which cannot protect each other. And if you were to advance one pawn, that would create maybe a weakness or a hole on a square where my knight can slide into. So after rook to d3, f5, and that's what I wanted to provoke, a square for my knight. And after queen to c5 here, I can just play a6 to protect the pawn. And I wanted to maintain this position so badly, but I think the move order got jumbled, and I freaked out for some reason. It's completely equal. I could simply bring my knight back or do anything other than how I played. I think here it's important for me to double my rooks, maybe rook d7, rook d8, and that way put pressure on the one pawn that's actually weak. Or b2, but there's no way to reach b2 right now. Once again, it's a mental state of, I just need to keep this position as equal as possible. I think in this position I'd actually offered a draw after making my move. Okay, I played queen d7 and offered a draw. She said no. And I kept thinking to myself, you know, I should be playing simple chess here, just double my rooks, pose questions to the pawn, the rooks will have to double as well, and there will be no maneuvers left. But okay. Queen d7, queen a2, king g7, there's so many moves. Like, it's impossible to think that one would be able to lose a position like this. It still looks dangerous, yes, because there's a passed pawn. That passed pawn's not going anywhere. And now it's starting to look worse. I think this still gives me a chance to double up my rooks, just because there's no pressure on this pawn. There's no point in pushing this pawn either. So maybe this was my last chance. d5, c takes d5, bishop takes, rook d8. Anyway. So many maneuvers and repetition. Okay. And now it's not possible to go rook d7 just because the c6 pawn is hanging, because my rook is undefended. Rook b c8. I should play here, and I think the plan is the same, to go rook c7, rook d7. So the entire time, this is all I had to do with my position to improve it, is to double up my rooks, because there was nothing else that white could do other than bring the king into the game and hope for some sort of maneuvering with the pieces that give me no chance to respond. And I think the whole point is that white wants to capture this d5 piece and hope for me to capture with the pawn, because then it gives white an opportunity to enter the c file and eventually capitalize on the passed pawn. But right now, it's impossible. Queen e6, rook d3, and I start making mistakes. Okay, so h5 and rook c4, and it's impossible for me to save this now. I thought maybe I can play knight c7, which is still kind of possible, but it's not very good. I don't like it very much. Queen b6, or queen takes, or d5 actually. I think d5 would have been the move, because then I have to take. Anyway, so I played king h6 in prep for this to avoid the check, and b5. And now that there's a way for white to enter the c file, it looks very, very bad for me. I think I have to play something like rook b6 or try to trade the rooks, but then I'm losing pawns. And maybe a queen ending with a pawn or two down is something I have to do in order to survive. But I played queen b6, even though I probably had enough time on the clock. And after queen to b4, I just had to go back because now there's a threat of checkmate. But it does seem like I'm playing very unusual chess. Chess that it's like you wouldn't play this way if you weren't, you know? It's very obvious in the way that I'm playing that I'm not playing as I usually would. And it's sad because on one hand, my opponent's playing really, really well. And on the other hand, I'm not doing anything to counter that. And I need to. So, yeah. Queen to e6. And it's just shambles from then on. And I'm pushing pawns when there's mating threats. And still pushing pawns. And there it is. I have to resign in this position, unfortunately. Why did I have to resign? What was the point? What was the point? Yes, queen g5. Sorry. Queen g5 is the mate that I had completely missed, unfortunately. But congratulations to my opponent. And then I went on to win one more game. Then I was 7 out of 8. And all I needed was a draw in the last game to secure the victory. But once again, what did I do? I messed it up. I went into the game thinking all I needed was a draw, offered a draw and move 30. She declined. I think she needed a win in order to actually place, or just get a better performance, I think. And it was, very unfortunate in my case. Just looking at chat, catching up with everyone. Thanks for being here. Yes. All right, so this is the last game that we're going to take a look at today. Thank you all for sticking with the stream and watching up to this point. It has been a lot of fun just reviewing my games, as well as being shocked at certain points, because as I said, I hadn't taken a look at any of these games since Ghana, because I also had the national championship, and then I've been trying to get back to doing some work. So yeah, it's just been a huge pleasure to be able to review my games. And eventually when I decide to create some annotations and actually enter my games into ChessBase, then I know I'll take maybe even a deeper look and really fix my mistakes. All right, so let's take a look. I played with the black pieces in the last game against Ledette. Ledette is the Ethiopian women's champion, and I played the French. I know that she was very well versed in the French, especially in lines such as this with the system that I played. The reason why I'm allowing the check on e1 is because the knight always goes to e7. Excuse me. And after f6, queen c2, long castles, and b4. I think the normal thing to do is just to try and trade pieces, and that's what I did. And after attempting to trade queens as well, I should have probably just taken with the knight, allowing the square for my own knight, because this is still a threat. And if I play, I'm trying to think real quick. Yeah, so if I play queen takes, queen to a4, I'm running the risk of allowing this, and I don't want to allow it, because now if I play king to b8, the knight is actually lost. It doesn't have any escape squares, so that's why it's important for me to take with the knight. But I so badly wanted to exchange queens and go into an endgame that I completely forgot that, it's still middle game, lots can happen. And so after g5, which was a bit of a bluff, I would have actually after b5 gone knight b8, allowed queen takes, and then gone for this. At least try to, and then swing over, but there wasn't any threat at all in this position after knight f1. I played g4 anyway, queen to h5, hoping to play a knight to g6 on the next move, and after g3, knight g6, knight g2 I did not expect. And now I can just play king to b8, and the square on e7 is available for my knight. And after knight to e3, bishop takes. Okay, so another moment where we need to just calm down and take a look at the position from a very easy chess perspective. What do I need to do? I need to centralize my rooks. I need to put my pieces on better squares. I need to try and put a stop to white's queenside attack. But of course, it's the last thing on my mind, and all I want to do is to ensure either a victory or a draw. So I thought, bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes. This is very nice. I will get mate, surely, somewhere. Completely forgetting that it's not necessary for white to capture back. And instead, she found the best response to my move, which was rook to b1. Because now if I retreat my bishop, the knight on c6 is hanging, and it will just look like I am a piece down. So instead, I have to play knight takes, d, pawn takes, and then I get to capture the rook. Knight takes, my king doesn't have any defense. My pieces aren't very well placed. My queen is kind of trapped, because if I move my queen to a square where it can start coming back, like bishop or queen h6, queen g7, it goes into the direct line of this bishop, and the knight can simply move away, maybe even capture a pawn in the process and attack my queen. So there's a lot I have to do in order to salvage this position. I was thinking about knight to d7, knight e7, but then I think I was thinking about queen a6. I'm sure my fate is doomed here. So knight e7 would have led to queen b4. Same. You're attacking the queen. You're attacking the pawn on b7 mate, and you're attacking the knight. So it's impossible for me to play knight e7. So here I played rook to d6, trying to avoid, queen c6 or queen a6, and hopefully also just trade the only rook that white has, and hopefully it'll be better. But Lidette played really, really well and started improving her position by coordinating her pieces, because now knight c5 is a huge threat. After captures, pawn takes, queen to d7, still not allowing my queen to come back, rook to c8, because I need to protect the c-pawn in case of emergencies. No, I think there was a reason for the rook c8. Let's see. Right, because knight takes d5 is a threat, I would have sacrificed the pawn, and I wanted to free my queen on the next move. So if I were to play something like queen to h6, allow the takes, and then come back to f8. Because my queen is really not an active member of society right now, and I have to do something about it. So bishop a3, look at the range of that bishop, so beautiful, and I played knight to f8 here. Bishop takes, rook takes, and I was just happy to get a minor piece off the board because a trade would be good for me. If all the pieces were off, I think it would be much better for me. And I have 7 pawns versus her 5 pawns and a rook for 2 knights. Not so bad. Now I just need to trade queens. I was happy to give up at least one of the pawns that I had just because I felt very under pressure, especially because of the knights. And I think things did get worse, especially because Lidette had some chances to use tactics to gain a bigger advantage. So after queen takes, I tried to shut out the queen a little bit, and after queen e2, now I can play c6, trying to consolidate my position, and queen b2. I felt a little bit more comfortable here. I could breathe, though the knights was still scaring me quite a bit. The knights had very solid squares. There was no way for me to attack the knights, and I almost considered giving up my rook for one of them, which I thought, let me not do that. King to c7, queen to c3, king back, and queen to b4. Now I had to defend b6, but I couldn't move the pawn because I knew that would leave just more squares behind, like we spoke about earlier. So after king to a7, I was happy with any perpetual check, so I just defended the pawn with the king even though there was a check, and rook to d8 to take away the squares from the queen. So I didn't want the queen to enter d6, and if I were to move the queen away, at least the queen was not attacking f8 either. And after knight to e5, I think there was a tactic around the corner here somewhere. Let me take a look. Queen a3, king b8, knight g2. No, that wasn't what I was looking at. Queen a4. Here maybe. Okay, knight g2 was played, but f4 is taken by the pawn. And I'm sure at some stage I saw a tactic for white, or maybe I was just seeing ghosts because of how scary the position looked as a whole. And now after king b8, knight b6, yes. Okay, it's still coming. And after b5, I didn't mind giving up another pawn to open up the c file and get rook c2 in if I could. And after queen takes, I took the pawn, and now I think knight f8 is a really good move. Though the engine doesn't recognize knight f8 as an option here. I thought knight f8 was good, queen a6, and something like knight d7 check, maybe? No? Okay, maybe it wasn't so good after all. Anyway, so queen a4 was played, and now I can just exchange. Though I was thinking it wasn't so bad, because if I'm able to win 3 pawns with my rook, and then capture the final pawn and give up my rook, even if I have 1 pawn, or 3 pawns, or no pawns, you cannot checkmate with 2 knights. So the only thing standing between me and a draw were the pawns. So I went on a pawn hunt. Nom 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 nom. And get ready for more noms. It's coming. And I'm going for the a4 pawn. And even though white is capturing all my pawns, I didn't mind as long as I was getting some in return. I was able to take another. And h5 was about to fall, but I thought I could start threatening promotion myself. Maybe that way it could distract the king, get the king away from the pawns, and I could capture the pawns. But the knights were relatively scary, and now that the rook was on the b file, I could maybe push the a pawn. And that was my only hope at this stage. My king was still a little bit far behind, so I tried to centralize it a bit. And after knight to d2, I felt hopeful. Okay, a5, a4, that pawn's rolling. Okay, g4. Now my king had spidey senses and thought, maybe my king can go for the pawns. That would be very nice. But even I can play a2, knight takes a2 and rook b2, and I'm threatening both the knights. Could be possible. But I played rook b2 first, and it's a draw. I don't think the position stopped here though, because I think the move was like this, this. No, it wasn't. It was like this. And then I played king here, king here, king here. Knight. No, it wasn't knight. Also not that. What was it? Yeah, probably knight c4. Takes, takes, takes. And then I got the knight. But it was a very topsy-turvy game, and I was happy to have solidified the draw. It was also very scary, because if I had lost my game and Lena had won her game, unfortunately direct encounter was not the first tiebreak, it was average opponent rating. And she had a better average opponent rating by 1 point, 1 rating point. It was ridiculous that they were using that in the regulations. However, we tried to fight, and I realized that if you're the one fighting, it's often the thing that's going to come back and bite you. So I thought to leave it alone. And in the end, when Lena drew, I realized that even a loss would have meant I would have won the tournament, and I didn't have to stress too much. But in the end, it worked out, and I was happy. And I guess that is how I won the African Championship. The end. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. No, thank you all for being here today. I appreciate you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this kind of content. I'm definitely going to be uploading things like recaps, and perhaps even doing some live streaming commentary and such soon. Trying to secure some events such as local junior events that we can commentate on, trying to grow chess in South Africa. So don't miss out, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you all for being here, and I'll be reading the live chat later, so I hope you were good. Thank you all. Bye.